Let's look at the process of this growth. What does this look like? Let me share with you a model that I came up with to explain growth in an organization. This model talks about our cognitive state at different points in a process of learning, our personal ones or the organizational ones. The first step in this model, it's very difficult to find the source. Some people say it's from McGregor, but it's all over. Many people have used it, so I really don't know who to cite. But people say that the first person to use it was McGregor, who actually came up with theory X and theory Y. This is one stage where we can be in the learning process. Unconscious, incompetent. Unconscious, incompetent, this is where we are doing something wrong, we're making a mistake, an error, but we don't know it. For instance, I'm behaving rudely toward my employees, and I'm not even aware how destructive that is or the implications of what I'm doing. Unconscious, incompetent. Or you can take it to other domains, tennis. I'm hitting a backhand, but my follow-through is not in the right direction. I'm not aware of it. Unconscious, incompetent. The problem with being unconscious, incompetent, first of all, the significance of it is that everyone at one stage or another is unconsciously incompetent. Whether you're 18 or 88. The problem with being unconscious incompetent is that very often it leads to a downward spiral with the environment. For instance, an unconscious incompetent leader will upset the employees. More and more employees will get upset. The best ones will leave. He will attract people who have no choice but to work there. And the organization ultimately will suffer a great deal in the long run. Or in tennis, the way it can interact with the environment is that players will know your weakness and will start playing to your backhand, will understand, will know your game better. Very often this is what happens, which is why it is so important to have safeguards. What are some safeguards? Coach. Whether it's a sports coach or an executive coach, to open my eyes. Beautiful enemies. So important to surround yourself with beautiful enemies. 360 feedback. It's exactly the reason why we did it here, why it's becoming so popular in our culture. Emotions. What Sean spoke about last week, intuitions, moral intuitions, very often tell us when there is something wrong. The thing is that most people don't listen, whether it's to these intuitions or whether it's to beautiful enemies. They don't listen, but those who do move on to conscious incompetent. Now I'm aware that I have a problem with my backhand. Now I'm aware that I'm hurting the other person, myself, and the organization by being theory X or by being rude. However, most people, even though they're aware, they will go back, they will revert back to the unconscious incompetent. It is very difficult to change a habit. It is difficult, it is scary, it is challenging for many people. So most people just rationalize why they're behaving the way they are. Theory X leader rationalizes the behavior. But people who continue beyond very often go to conscious competent. I've just changed my follow-through in tennis. I've just changed my behavior. I've become more benevolent and generous toward my employees. Conscious competent. The problem here is that very often we go back to unconscious incompetent. Why? Because changing a habit is difficult. Remember John Dryden, we first make our habits and then our habits make us. Why else do we go back? Because usually we go down before we go up again. Right? If you just change your grip, those of you who play sports, racket sports, if you just change your grip, your game will go down before it goes up again. If you just put on a new behavior in terms of leadership, your performance will go down before it goes up again. And the inclination is to say, forget it. I'm going back to my habits, to the old and tried ways. Maybe they're not great, but they're better than this. This is also on the organizational level why it's so difficult to make a change. It is so difficult because there is no psychological safety, no space to fail, no space for going down before going up again. So a lot of conditions need to be in place for us to get past conscious competence to unconscious competence. This is where we're doing the work, and we're doing it well. We're doing the work, and we're doing it well. The backhand feels natural again. Being a theory Y manager feels just right, as if I've been doing it my whole life, after forming a new habit. But there is also a danger here. The danger is that unconscious competence, because I'm doing things so well, because things are going so well, I develop hubris, overconfidence, or what is called success-induced blindness. Success-induced blindness. This is very common among highly successful CEOs. They do well, things are going well, and they stop listening. People's Express was an organization, an airline that started back in 1980. By 1984, it was worth over $2 billion. At the time, the fastest startup in history. Don Burr, the founder of People's Express, was on the cover of every magazine. I want to show you a brief excerpt of Don Burr. I'm not going to show you the whole excerpt. I'm going to stop after 2 minutes because we have to leave. But I want to just give you a sense of Don Burr. Until 1984, the most successful. From 1984, by 1986, bankrupt. Why? Because he stopped listening. He was so successful, so powerful, that he stopped listening to his employees, to his board, to the surveys that were showing that People Express was becoming, in the words of many of the customers, people's distress. Don Burr, this is an interview at Harvard Business School.
Missed that whole thing, you know, like Gary Hart with the women's revolution, it went right by us.
Let me try to explore a particular area, and that's this. Do you think that despite the, what would be your recommendation to a new entrepreneur thinking about starting up his company or her company? Would you recommend, do you still believe that this philosophy and approach to managing is a viable one for the long pull? It has a lot of attractions from a human resource point of view in terms of motivation and enhancement and development and competence and commitment and all of those things, cooperation. But it ran into some problems, and I guess the bottom line I would like to ask you about is, do you believe that it has applicability and has in other situations to other companies, despite the problems that you ran into, and if so, in what way should it be applied?
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm as I'm sure you know, Mike, I'm going around the country, around the world, talking about the efficacy of freedom, about emancipating people, and getting the energy flow that occurs when you do that. I'm writing a book about the glory of People Express, which was the emancipation of our people, the freedom of our people, of transforming, of talking about transforming organized settings from one of putting people in little boxes and telling them what to do for the next hour and don't do anything after that and I'll give you another order later, transforming that into freewheeling corporations where people are charged with responsibility and for getting it done and getting it done within the confines that that organized setting has. So I go around, talk about this. I'm writing a book about it because I think the highest leverage for me is to bring this kind of human thinking to the workplace to the best of my ability. That's the glory of People Express. The other thing that I'm talking about and writing a book about is the frustration of People Express. Is if that was so good, if freeing up the people was so remarkable, if they did such great things, if they were so highly productive, if they could generate the same level of revenues as American Airlines and do it with $1 billion a year less expenses, $1 billion a year less expenses, same revenue, that's how productive they were. How come it didn't work? Okay, so the frustration of People Express I'm writing about is these other things that we talked about. Okay, so what did you learn about the people things that didn't work? You know, and the people things that we talked about, the nature of leadership, and the fact that watch out for leaders who are too successful. When they get too successful, start trying to find a way to put a rope around them. Countervailing power. I don't think a CEO should be in a position like I was in. I had too much power. I mean, it took an extremely powerful board member to, after 4.5 years of going from 0 to 2 billion, to say, Don, don't you think you ought to think about? I mean, here I was, a multi-millionaire, and, you know, and on the cover of every magazine. What's he going to say to me? You're not doing it right? When every vision I'd had was in full swing? So a CEO should have a very strong board. A board of directors, we all complain about them. It's not quite right. Oh, they don't do this, they don't do that. They're not that bad.
So, give me 1 minute. So what he's saying here, and later in this piece, again, a minute later, he says, you should listen as a CEO to everyone. Listen to your mother, listen to your board, listen to your friends. That's how you avoid the success-induced blindness, and that's how you reach the spiral. Because the thing is, we all go through this spiral, and we'll go through this spiral till our last day. And the key is not to be here. It's inevitable that we're here at times. The key here is how do we spend the minimum time unconscious and competent. And to do that, we have to listen, we have to be open, we have to create a personal board of directors, a group of friends, of beautiful enemies, who will tell us where they are frustrated and who will also appreciate our glory.